I miss science class. Emasculating scientists in The Walking Dead. Depictions of scientists in zombie media often highlight stereotypes of scientists as either socially awkward lab coat-wearing nerds or the intellectual offspring of Victor Frankenstein, so-called mad scientists whose illegal and immoral work is frequently the very cause of the zombie-causing germ or chemical. Walking Dead graphic novel creator and television series executive director Robert Kirkman has emphatically stated on multiple occasions that revealing a precise scientific explanation for the zombie infection is not only uninteresting to him, but in his opinion runs the risk of spoiling the coherent secondary world nature of the fictional zombie apocalypse. Indeed, he openly pokes fun at the impotency of the scientific establishment in his subcreation. In those rare instances where scientific knowledge is painted in a positive light, the scientists themselves are usually depicted as socially inept stereotypical nerds, egotistical know-it-alls who aren't as almighty as they first appear, and essentially weak, usually ending up dead. This paper will explore a number of examples from the television series and graphic novel which demonstrate Kirkman's apparent delight in emasculating science and scientists in The Walking Dead. Very few scientific characters appear in the graphic novel, not surprising given Kirkman's stated aversion to focusing on the scientific cause of the zombie apocalypse. Besides Woodbury's resident physician, Dr. Stevens, there are only two characters in the graphic novel that could be called scientists, one an amateur or backyard scientist, and the other a science teacher. Alice, an interior design student before the epidemic, ends up in Woodbury where she apprentices under Dr. Stevens, gaining important medical skills. When she escapes Woodbury for the prison, she is frustrated that no one in Rick's group seems to care about the epidemic itself. Quote, "You know what bugs me, Rick? Nobody is out here asking why anymore. And if they are, they're not doing anything to find out. Maybe you think the problem is beyond us, but I, for one, would like to at least attempt to find out the cause of all this insanity. And the only way to do that is to study them, while they're still alive or whatever it is they are. What if I discover an easier way of killing them? What if I find a cure, or at least something to save us so that we won't turn into these things when we die?" Unquote. Her attempts to experiment on zombies are cut short when the governor storms the prison and she is killed. It is interesting to note that the only person apparently interested in experimenting on zombies in order to learn about the infection is an amateur, one who is not taken very seriously by the other characters, and who can only dabble in the scientific method until her fairly quick demise. The only other science-minded character in the graphic novel is Eugene Porter. Eventually revealed to be a high school science teacher, the initially egotistical, mullet-wearing, socially inept Eugene bluffed his way into various survivor groups by claiming to be a government scientist who had been working on weaponizing the human genome. He further claimed that he knew how the zombie-causing disease could be stopped, and that it was therefore imperative that he be safely delivered to Washington, D.C. This ruse guaranteed that those who were stronger, better equipped, and thus more apt to survive, such as Abraham and Rick's group, would take care of him. When it was discovered that the radio that Eugene claims he used to stay in contact with Washington has no batteries, the high school science teacher explains that his ruse was a matter of survival. Quote, "I'm not strong. I can't get by on my looks. I'm not brave. I'm not useful. I have two things going for me. I am extremely intelligent, and I am a good liar. I didn't have a lot of options." Unquote. Before his true identity is exposed, he does make a number of observations concerning zombie behavior. For example, that they can seemingly starve and become weak, eventually losing control over their ability to walk and attack humans. However, one can argue that any zombie survivor would eventually figure this out given enough time. This isn't rocket science after all. In the later issues of the graphic novel, Eugene does become an important member of Rick's group and the larger communities that Rick helps to found, not because of any understanding of the zombie apocalypse, but mainly for the technologies that Eugene can help to reestablish, such as manufacturing bullets and designing a mill that allows the survivors to make bread. But as Eugene himself notes, "It wasn't my design, I just read a book." While Rick counters that Eugene is very important in his ability to preserve technological advances, the point has certainly been made. Long gone are the days of science for knowledge's sake. Practicality is the watchword. An engineer is far more important than a scientist in this brave new world. Interestingly, Eugene finally managed to win over Rosita in the graphic novel, several years after Rosita's love, Abraham's death. But Eugene's self-admitted ineptness with women greatly affected their romantic relationship. As Eugene reminded Rick, quote, "Women were never my area of expertise. I know I'm not traditionally what is thought of as good enough for a woman like Rosita, and I'm certain she knows that too. There were times in the past where she pretty much said that to me." In the television series version of Eugene, we see a likewise clumsy, egotistical buffoon who ineptly propositions a lesbian character after trying to impress her with his knowledge of dinosaurs and how to build a battery from aluminum foil. Near the end of the season 5 premiere, we finally get to hear a few more supposed details of Eugene's knowledge of the cause and cure for the disease. Quote, "I was part of a 10-person team at the Human Genome Project to weaponize diseases to fight weaponized diseases. Pathogenic microorganisms with pathogenic microorganisms. Fire with fire. Interdepartmental drinks were had, relationships made, information shared. I am keenly aware of all the details behind fail-safe delivery systems to kill every living person on this planet. I believe with a little tweaking in the terminals in DC, we can flip the script. Take out every last dead one of them. Fire with fire. All things being equal, it does sound pretty badass." Unquote. Yes, it may sound badass, but as in the graphic novel, Eugene's bravado turns out to be sound and fury, signifying nothing. In the television series, a detailed scientific study of zombieism is done by CDC scientist Dr. Edwin Jenner in Season 1, a major departure from the graphic novel. Rick Grimes stakes the safety of his family and friends on traveling to the CDC campus in Atlanta, only to find it staffed by Jenner, the sole remaining self-admittedly second-class scientist. Jenner, who loses his will to live after his carelessness leads to the destruction of the vital brain tissue samples of his late brilliant scientist wife, note yet another dead scientist, has not only failed in his attempt to understand the disease, but due to his having a rather myopic education specializing in virology, has allowed the CDC to run through its petroleum reserves, leading to the self-destruction of the center. Only Shane gives voice to suspicions about Jenner's motivations when he inquires about where the rest of the researchers have gone, and Shane has a hard time believing that they would all just desert their posts. "Many couldn't face walking out the door," Jenner explains. "They opted out. There was a rash of suicides." When asked by Andrea why he didn't leave as well, Jenner just offers that he just kept working, hoping to do some good. In his review of the episode TS-19, Vanity Fair's Mike Ryan took issue what he called Dr. Asshole Von Know-It-All being the last man standing at the CDC. In Ryan's words, quote, "I know a few researchers personally. Every single one of these guys would geek out at the prospect of trying to come up with a cure for disease that has affected the world. I don't buy for 1 second that only Dr. Jenner, half-heartedly mind you, continued his research," unquote. It is indeed a rather pessimistic view of scientists that Kirkman has presented viewers with in the series, a depiction that does not improve as the series unfolds. Season 3 introduces the original character Milton Mamet in Woodbury, who is explained by Kirkman as, quote, "not exactly a scientist, but he's a smart guy that is trying to find out how zombies behave. Watching him do his little experiments is going to be a lot of fun," unquote. Little experiments is an interesting term, for Milton, like Jenner, works in the equivalent of a high school laboratory set up in a stark basement. Mamet is a stereotypical nerd, complete with glasses and button-down shirt with a pocket simply perfect for a pocket protector overstuffed with pens, if both pocket protectors and pens were not in such short supply in the zombie apocalypse. He is desexualized in every possible way and is never shown having what would be termed a normal, healthy relationship with any human being. Actor Dallas Roberts, who portrayed Milton, openly discussed the rather negatively stereotypical depiction of his character without batting an eye. He described Milton as, quote, "socially awkward and not a people person at all," and as afraid of real people as he is of dead people, unquote. This social awkwardness is most evident when he asks inappropriate questions, such as pushing Andrea and Michonne for information about people in their lives who had turned into zombies, or, my personal favorite, when he asks Herschel if he can see the stump of his lower leg that had been amputated to save Herschel's life. I'm not showing you my leg, Herschel incredulously retorts. It's important data, Milton pleads, in a way too eager voice. Only Herschel's humor saves the moment from being excruciatingly uncomfortable for the viewer. I just met you. At least buy me a drink first, the former farmer jokes. As we see in the series, Milton wasn't out to win a Nobel Prize. The first experiment the audience sees is conducted on Michonne's now beheaded companion zombies. Milton is impressed by Michonne's use of the zombies as repellent for other zombies and her foresight to eliminate the zombies' ability to attack her by removing their arms and lower jaws. Milton takes on the role of Eugene here, explaining to the audience that zombies who do not eat slowly starve. Milton's experiments on the so-called pets, poking them like the frog or fetal pig commonly dissected in most high school biology classes, are decidedly low-tech and largely ineffective. Milton, who has up to this point never personally witnessed a reanimation, has a hypothesis that, quote, a trace of the person they once were is still trapped inside like an echo, unquote. This leads Milton to test his hypothesis on Michael Coleman, a man dying of prostate cancer, with Coleman's expressed consent. Milton designs a scientific experiment based on his limited equipment, in which he and Mr. Coleman practice a routine of cognitive tests before the man's death, involving both visual cues, photographs, and auditory ones, the ringing of a Tibetan singing bowl, and a series of questions. The background setting of the experiment is kept constant, with Coleman surrounded by his favorite artwork and furniture, including his bedside lamps, and the same background music. Milton tries to keep a scientific detachment from his experiment, returning to Coleman as, quote, the subject, and explaining to Andrea that her role is to euthanize the subject at the conclusion of the experiment. However, when the reanimation actually occurs, Milton loses his objectivity and tries to interpret Coleman's reaction as sign of intelligence when they are merely a zombie's instinct to feed. Therefore, Milton is not only a socially inept human being, but a rather bad scientist to boot. Actor Dallas Roberts openly admitted as much. When asked in an interview for the AMC Walking Dead official blog if he hoped Milton would, quote, bloom into a full-blown mad scientist, Roberts explained that literally every idea that Milton has forwarded since he showed up on the show has failed. Finally, young Mika Samuels is painted as a meek girl nearly paralyzed by her fear of both zombies and dangerous humans, similar to Dallas Roberts' characterization of Milton. I can't kill people, she explains to Carol. When the bad people were at the prison, they were right in front of us, and I held up my gun, but I couldn't pull the trigger. This fear puts others around her in danger. Her sister Lizzie had to pull the trigger at the prison, and Tyrese had to chase her around in the woods after the prison's demise when she was spooked merely by birds. Not coincidentally, Mika is revealed to be a science nerd, lamenting to Carol that she misses science class, quote, except for when we had to do stuff like cut up planaria worms. Now, Carol reminds her that people have to do worse nowadays, but Mika counters, I don't gotta. Carol warns Mika that she has to toughen up, but Mika argues, I don't have to be tough. I can run. I'm good at that. In typical science nerd fashion, Mika is portrayed as being unable to stand up for herself, a wimp and a wuss. Carol and Tyrese discuss their fears about the two Samuel sisters, with Carol noting that while Lizzie is troubled because she doesn't understand what walkers are, Mika is worse. She doesn't have a mean bone in her body. Both sisters are therefore maladjusted to living in the post-apocalyptic world. Mika is brutally murdered by her psychotic sister to prove that walkers are just like other people, and Lizzie is murdered by Carol because she is a clear and present danger to everyone around her. Interestingly, there is a nod to Mika's conversation with Carol about science class in the season 5 premiere, No Sanctuary. As Rick's group escapes from Terminus, they look back at the plume of smoke rising from the false sanctuary, and Rick wonders if the fire is still burning. Carol notes the black color of the smoke and matter-of-factly states it is. This refers to the distant fire that Carol and Mika spy in the episode The Grove. Mika explains there that she knows the fire is still burning because the smoke was black. In both fictional and factual media, science is always looked to by society for answers. But the most common media portrayals of scientists as either sinners or saviors do nothing to bolster the public's understanding of either scientists or the science they work on. In The Walking Dead, we see a third type of equally troubling stereotype, the scientist as ineffective, weak, emasculated. If Daryl dies, we riot. If a scientist dies, well, it's just another episode.